The hunger had stolen everything from Penelope Sanders, except her determination to keep walking, though even that was fading fast as the snow came down harder on the streets of Clifton Hill, Arizona Territory, turning everything into a blur of white and gray. She had been walking for 3 days straight, having left the mining camp where she had been working as a cook after the foreman tried to force himself on her in the dark hours before dawn. The 20-year-old woman had nothing but the thin dress she wore and a shawl that did little against the February cold of 1885. Her stomach had stopped growling yesterday, replaced by a hollow ache that made her dizzy with each step. The mountains surrounding this small town seemed to press in on her, and the snow that rarely fell this far south in the territory had chosen this week to blanket everything in freezing white. Penelope stumbled, catching herself against a wooden post outside what looked like a general store. Her vision swam, black spots dancing across her eyes. She tried to take another step, but her legs would not obey. The world tilted sideways, and she felt herself falling toward the snow-covered street, unable to stop herself. She never felt the impact. Darkness swallowed her whole. Preston Morgan had been in town for supplies when the snow started falling harder. The 24-year-old cowboy had spent the last 6 years working cattle ranches across the territory, saving every penny he could to eventually buy his own piece of land. He was leading his horse toward the stable when he saw the woman collapse in the street ahead of him. Without thinking, Preston broke into a run, his boots kicking up snow as he reached her crumpled form. He dropped to his knees beside her, turning her over gently. Her face was pale as death, her lips tinged blue. He pressed his fingers to her throat and felt a weak pulse. "Hey there, can you hear me?" he asked, but she did not respond. Her body was frighteningly light when he gathered her into his arms. He could feel her bones through the thin fabric of her dress. This woman was starving. Preston's room was just above the saloon, but he knew she needed warmth and food immediately. The boarding house where he sometimes stayed was closer, just across the street. He carried her quickly through the snow, shouldering open the door with more force than necessary. Mrs. Chen, the Chinese woman who ran the boarding house, looked up from where she was sweeping the floor. Her eyes widened when she saw the unconscious woman in Preston's arms. "She needs help," Preston said. "Collapsed in the street. She is freezing, and I think she has not eaten in days." Mrs. Chen nodded quickly, her usual stern expression softening. "Bring her upstairs. 3rd room on the left is empty. I will get blankets." Preston carried Penelope up the narrow stairs, shouldering open the door to a small but clean room with a bed, a washstand, and a small stove in the corner. He laid her gently on the bed, then immediately went to work starting a fire in the stove. His hands moved with practiced efficiency, having started countless fires on cold mornings during cattle drives. Mrs. Chen appeared with an armful of quilts and blankets. "She is very thin," the older woman observed, laying the blankets over Penelope's still form. "When did you last see her eat?" "I have never seen her before," Preston said. "She just fell in the street. Her dress is very worn, no coat in this weather. She is running from something or she has nowhere to go." Mrs. Chen studied the unconscious woman with knowing eyes. "I will make soup. You stay with her, make sure she wakes up. If she does not wake soon, we get the doctor." Preston nodded, pulling a wooden chair close to the bed as Mrs. Chen left. He watched the woman's face for any sign of consciousness. She looked young, probably around 20, with dark brown hair that had come loose from its pins and spread across the pillow. Even pale and half frozen, he could see she was beautiful, but it was more than that. There was something about her that pulled at him, made him want to know her story. He had seen plenty of suffering in his years drifting from ranch to ranch. The West was hard on everyone, but especially on women alone. Whatever had brought her to collapse in the street, he knew it was not good. The fire began to warm the small room, and Preston removed his heavy coat, draping it over the footboard. He sat back down, his eyes never leaving her face. Her breathing seemed to be getting stronger, more regular. That was good. After what felt like an eternity but was probably only 20 minutes, her eyelids began to flutter. Preston leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "Can you hear me?" he asked softly. "You are safe. You are inside now." Penelope's eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first. Blue eyes, he noticed, the color of the sky on a clear summer day. They widened with fear when they found his face. "Easy," Preston said, holding up his hands. "I am not going to hurt you. You fainted in the street. I brought you inside." She tried to sit up, but her arms shook with the effort and she fell back against the pillows. "Where am I?" "Boarding house in Clifton Hill. Mrs. Chen runs it. She is making you soup right now." Preston kept his voice gentle, the way he would with a skittish horse. "What is your name?" "Penelope," she whispered. "Penelope Sanders, Preston Morgan." "When did you last eat, Penelope?" Her eyes filled with tears that she tried to blink away. 3 days ago, maybe 4. I had some bread I took from the mining camp, but it ran out." "Which mining camp?" She looked away. "Copper Ridge, north of here." Preston knew the place. "Rough operation, rougher men. You walked from Copper Ridge. That is more than 30 miles. I had to leave." He did not press her for details. The fear in her eyes told him enough. "Well, you are safe here, Mrs. Chen is bringing soup and you are going to eat and rest. We can figure out everything else later." A sob escaped her throat. "I do not have money to pay for a room. I do not have anything." "Do not worry about that right now," Preston said. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and patted her hand where it rested on the blanket. "Just focus on getting your strength back." The door opened, and Mrs. Chen entered carrying a tray with a steaming bowl of soup and a cup of tea. The smell of chicken and vegetables filled the room, and Preston heard Penelope's stomach growl loudly. "Can you sit up?" Mrs. Chen asked, setting the tray on the small table beside the bed. Preston helped Penelope into a sitting position, propping pillows behind her back. Mrs. Chen handed her the bowl, but Penelope's hands shook so badly that the spoon rattled against the ceramic. "Here," Preston said gently, taking the bowl and spoon from her. "Let me help." She looked embarrassed but too weak to argue. Preston carefully spooned the broth to her lips. She sipped it slowly, her eyes closing in relief as the warm liquid slid down her throat. He continued feeding her, patient and careful, making sure she did not eat too fast and make herself sick. "Small amounts first," Mrs. Chen said. "Her stomach needs to adjust. Too much too fast will make her sick." Penelope managed about half the bowl before she shook her head slightly. "I cannot eat any more right now." "That is fine," Preston said, setting the bowl aside. "You did good. Rest now. But I should leave. I am causing too much trouble." "You are not going anywhere in this condition," Mrs. Chen said firmly. "You stay here until you are well. We will discuss payment later." Tears slipped down Penelope's cheeks. "Thank you. I do not know how to thank you." "No thanks needed," Preston said. "Just rest." Mrs. Chen handed Penelope the cup of tea. "Drink this. It will help warm you from the inside." Penelope's hands were steadier now, and she managed to hold the cup herself. She sipped the hot tea while Preston and Mrs. Chen exchanged glances. The older woman nodded toward the door, and Preston followed her out into the hallway. "She needs at least a week of rest and good food," Mrs. Chen said in a low voice. "Maybe more. She is half-starved." "I will pay for her room and board," Preston said. Mrs. Chen studied him with sharp eyes. "You do not know this girl. Does not matter. She needs help." "You are a good man, Preston Morgan, but be careful. A young woman alone, a young man helping her. People will talk." Let them talk. She needs help and I am going to make sure she gets it. Mrs. Chen nodded slowly. Very well. I will bring her more soup in a few hours. She needs to eat small amounts throughout the day, and she will need proper clothes. That dress is falling apart. I will take care of it, Preston said. He returned to the room to find Penelope had finished the tea and was lying back against the pillows, her eyes heavy with exhaustion. I am going to let you rest, Preston said, but I will be back in a few hours to check on you. Mrs. Chen will bring more soup later. Why are you being so kind to me? Penelope asked, her voice barely above a whisper. You do not even know me. Preston considered the question. Why was he doing this? He had passed plenty of people in need before, offered help here and there, but something about finding her collapsed in the snow had struck him differently. Maybe it was the way she looked so small and fragile in his arms. Maybe it was the fear in her eyes that spoke of things worse than hunger. Or maybe it was something he could not quite name yet. Because someone should, he finally said. Get some rest, Penelope. He left the room, closing the door softly behind him. The snow was still falling when he looked out the window at the end of the hallway. He needed to get her some proper clothes and more food supplies. But first, he wanted to know more about what happened at Copper Ridge. Preston made his way to the saloon across the street, where men gathered to drink and share news. He ordered a whiskey and listened to the conversations around him. It did not take long before he heard what he was looking for. Heard there was trouble up at Copper Ridge, one grizzled miner was saying. One of the camp cooks ran off after the foreman tried to force himself on her. Bill Thompson is mad as hell about it, saying she stole food when she left. Bill Thompson is a pig, another man spat. Everyone knows what kind of man he is, probably did try to force himself on her. Woman like that working in a mining camp, what does she expect? A third man said with a shrug. Preston's jaw tightened. He finished his whiskey and left before he said something he would regret. So that was the situation. Penelope had been working as a cook, the foreman had attacked her, and she had fled with whatever food she could carry. Now the foreman was spreading lies about her to save his own reputation. He spent the next hour at the general store, buying fabric for a dress, a warm coat, sturdy boots, and more food supplies. The storekeeper raised an eyebrow at the purchases but said nothing. Preston did not care what anyone thought. When he returned to the boarding house, Mrs. Chen met him at the door. She is sleeping. Good deep sleep. That is what she needs. I bought some things for her, Preston said, showing the packages. I was thinking maybe you could help her with the dress. I do not know much about women's clothing. Mrs. Chen's stern face cracked into a small smile. I can help. You are spending a lot of money on a stranger, Preston Morgan. It is just money, he said. I can always make more. Not just money makes a man spend this way, Mrs. Chen observed, but I will not pry. I will wake her in another hour for more soup. Preston went to his own room down the hall and lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling. His mind kept returning to Penelope's blue eyes, the way they had filled with tears when he told her she was safe. He had never been the type to believe in fate or destiny. Life was what you made of it through hard work and determination. But something about finding her in the snow felt like it was meant to happen. He must have dozed off because the next thing he knew, there was a soft knock on his door. He opened it to find Mrs. Chen. She is awake and has eaten more soup. She is asking for you. Preston followed her down the hall. Penelope was sitting up in bed, looking slightly better already. Some color had returned to her cheeks, and her eyes were clearer. Preston, she said when he entered. Mrs. Chen told me you bought clothes for me. You should not have done that. You need them, he said simply, pulling the chair close to the bed again. How are you feeling? Better, stronger. The soup helped so much. She looked down at her hands, picking at the blanket. Mrs. Chen also told me you are paying for this room. I cannot let you do that. I do not know how I will ever repay you. Do not worry about repaying me. Just focus on getting well. Preston leaned forward. Penelope, I heard some talk in town about what happened at Copper Ridge. You do not have to tell me anything you do not want to, but I want you to know that you are safe here. Bill Thompson cannot touch you. Her eyes widened. You know about Bill? I heard he is spreading rumors that you stole from the camp. I am guessing that is not the whole truth. Penelope's face crumpled and she wrapped her arms around herself. He came to my tent 3 nights ago. It was late and everyone else was asleep. He had been drinking. He said things, terrible things about what he wanted to do to me. When I told him to leave, he grabbed me. Her voice broke. I fought him off. I had a knife I used for cutting vegetables and I cut his hand when he would not let go. He stumbled back, cursing at me, saying I would regret it. I knew I had to leave right then, so I grabbed what food I could carry and I ran. You did the right thing, Preston said firmly. And you are safe now, I promise you that. But he will tell people I am a thief. No one will hire me. I will have nowhere to go. Then you will stay here in Clifton Hill. This town needs good people, and I can tell you are one of them. Preston surprised himself with the intensity of his words. I will help you find work, somewhere safe. Why? Penelope asked, tears streaming down her face. Why would you do all this for me? You do not know me. I am nobody. You are not nobody, Preston said. He reached out and gently wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb. The gesture was intimate, more intimate than he had intended, but he did not pull away. You are a woman who survived something terrible and had the courage to run. That makes you pretty damn remarkable in my book. Penelope stared at him, something shifting in her expression. I do not even know what to say. You do not have to say anything. Just rest and eat and get your strength back. Everything else will work itself out. Over the next several days, Preston fell into a routine. He would check on Penelope every morning and evening, bringing her meals and sitting with her while she ate. Mrs. Chen had sewn the fabric he bought into a simple but practical dress, and Penelope looked more like herself with each passing day. The hollows in her cheeks began to fill out, and the fear in her eyes gradually softened. They talked during those visits, at first just small things, but gradually sharing more. Preston told her about his years working cattle ranches, his dream of owning his own land someday. Penelope told him about growing up in Kansas, how her parents had died of fever when she was 16, how she had been working ever since to survive. I always thought I would find somewhere to belong, she said one evening as they sat together in her room. The snow had finally stopped, but the temperature remained cold. But I just kept moving from place to place. Nothing ever felt like home. I know what you mean, Preston said. I have been drifting since I was 18. Sometimes I wonder if I even know what home would feel like. Did you have family? Penelope asked. Parents and a younger sister. They had a small farm in Missouri. I left when I was old enough because my father and I could not see eye to eye on anything. I sent money back when I could, but I have not been home in 6 years. Preston looked away. My mother wrote me last year that my sister got married. I should have been there, but I was on a cattle drive in Texas. By the time I got the letter, it was months too late. Do you regret leaving? Sometimes. But I could not stay there and be who my father wanted me to be. I had to find my own way. He looked back at her. What about you? Any family left? A brother somewhere, maybe. He left before our parents died. I have not heard from him in years. For all I know, he is dead. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Preston found himself noticing little things about her. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was thinking. The small dimple that appeared in her left cheek when she smiled, which she was doing more often now. I should let you rest, he said, standing. But I will see you tomorrow. Preston, Penelope said as he reached the door. "Thank you for everything. I do not think I would be alive if you had not found me." "I am glad I found you," he said, and he meant it more than he could express. After a week, Penelope was strong enough to leave the room. Preston took her for a walk through town, lending her his arm as she was still a bit unsteady. Clifton Hill was a small town, with a main street lined with wooden buildings, a church at one end, and the copper mines visible in the hills beyond. Most of the population worked in the mines or supported those who did. "It is pretty here," Penelope said, looking around at the snow-dusted landscape. "Different from Kansas." "Arizona Territory is different from most places," Preston said. "Hot as hell in summer, but the mountains make it bearable, and when it snows like this, it is almost peaceful." They walked past the general store, and Preston noticed people watching them. He knew what they were thinking, what stories they were probably inventing. A young cowboy and a young woman who appeared out of nowhere. The gossip would spread fast. "People are staring," Penelope said quietly. "Let them stare. They will find something else to talk about soon enough." But Preston knew it was not that simple. In a small town like this, reputation mattered, especially for a woman. He needed to help Penelope establish herself, find respectable work, show everyone that she was a good person worthy of their respect. An idea came to him as they passed the church. "Wait here a moment," he said, leaving Penelope on the steps while he went inside. Reverend Paul Mitchell was organizing hymnals when Preston entered. The Reverend was a kind man in his 50s, known for his fair-mindedness and charity. "Preston Morgan," the Reverend said with a smile. "Good to see you. What brings you by?" "I need to ask you about something," Preston said. He explained the situation with Penelope, leaving out the details of what happened at Copper Ridge but making it clear she was a woman in need of help and honest work. The Reverend listened carefully. "And you are vouching for this young woman?" "I am. She is a hard worker and a good person. She just needs a chance." The Reverend considered this. "My wife has been looking for help with the church's charity work. We feed the miners' families every Sunday, and Margaret could use an extra pair of hands in the kitchen. It does not pay much, but it is honest work, and it would give Miss Sanders a place in the community." "That would be perfect," Preston said, relief flooding through him. "Thank you, Reverend. Bring her by tomorrow. Margaret will want to meet her first, but I think it will work out fine." Preston returned to Penelope with the good news. Her face lit up with joy. "Truly? The Reverend's wife will give me a chance. You meet her tomorrow, but yes, it is a start, Penelope. A good start." She threw her arms around him in an impulsive hug. Preston froze for a moment, surprised, then wrapped his arms around her, holding her close. She was warm and solid against him, and he could smell the soap Mrs. Chen had given her for washing. Something shifted in his chest, a feeling he had not experienced before. Penelope pulled back, her cheeks flushing. "I am sorry. I should not have done that." "It is all right," Preston said, his voice coming out rougher than intended. "I am happy for you." But as they walked back to the boarding house, Preston realized that what he felt was more than just happiness for her success. He was starting to care about Penelope Sanders in a way that went beyond simple kindness to a stranger. The thought both thrilled and terrified him. The meeting with Margaret Mitchell went well. The Reverend's wife was a plump, cheerful woman who took an immediate liking to Penelope. After talking for an hour, she offered Penelope the position on the spot. "You start this Sunday," Margaret said. "We feed about 40 families, so it is quite a bit of work, but I can tell you know your way around a kitchen." "I do, madam. Thank you so much for this opportunity." Penelope was beaming when she left the Reverend's house with Preston. "I have a job, a real, respectable job." "Told you it would work out," Preston said, matching her smile. They celebrated with dinner at the boarding house. Mrs. Chen preparing a special meal of roasted chicken and vegetables. As they ate, Preston found himself watching Penelope more than he should, noticing the way candlelight caught in her hair, the musical sound of her laugh when Mrs. Chen told a funny story about one of her other boarders. After dinner, Preston walked Penelope up to her room. They stood in the doorway, neither quite ready to say goodnight. "I start work for the Reverend's wife on Sunday," Penelope said. "And Mrs. Chen said I can work for her too, helping with the boarding house in exchange for my room. That means you do not have to pay for me anymore." "I do not mind paying," Preston said. "I know. But I need to stand on my own feet. You have already done so much for me." She reached out and took his hand, her fingers warm against his. "More than I can ever repay." Preston looked down at their joined hands, his heart beating faster. "Penelope, I need to tell you something." "What is it?" He met her eyes, those clear blue eyes that had haunted his dreams since the day he found her. "When I carried you out of the snow that day, I thought I was just helping someone in need. But these past 2 weeks, getting to know you, spending time with you, it has become more than that for me." Penelope's breath caught. "More how?" "I think I am falling in love with you," Preston said, the words tumbling out before he could second-guess them. "I know it is fast, maybe too fast, and if you do not feel the same way I understand, but I could not keep it to myself anymore." For a moment, Penelope just stared at him and Preston's heart sank. He had said too much, pushed too hard. Then she smiled, a smile that lit up her entire face. "I think I am falling in love with you too," she whispered. "I have been trying not to because I thought maybe you were just being kind, that you felt sorry for me. But Preston, when I am with you, I feel safe. I feel like I can breathe again, like maybe I finally found somewhere I belong." Preston cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs stroking her cheeks. "You do belong, here with me." He kissed her then, soft and gentle, pouring all his feelings into that single moment. Penelope kissed him back, her hands coming up to grip his shirt, holding him close. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. "I have never felt this way before," Penelope admitted. "It scares me too," Preston said. "But I think the best things in life are a little scary." They stood there in the doorway for a long moment, just holding each other. Finally, Preston forced himself to step back. "You should get some rest. Big day on Sunday." "Will you come to the church to see me at my new job? I will be there," he promised. Preston floated back to his room, his mind spinning. He was in love. After all these years of drifting, never staying in one place long enough to form real connections, he had fallen in love with a woman he had known for only 2 weeks. It should have felt reckless or foolish, but instead, it felt like the most right thing in the world. Sunday came, and Preston made sure to attend the service at the church. He watched Penelope working in the kitchen afterward, helping Margaret serve food to the miners' families. She moved with confidence and grace, smiling at the children, offering kind words to the worn-looking mothers. The community was already warming to her, he could tell. After the meal was finished and the dishes cleaned, Preston waited outside the church. Penelope emerged with Margaret, laughing at something the older woman had said. When she saw Preston, her face brightened even more. "How did I do?" she asked when she reached him. "You were perfect," he said. "Everyone loved you. Margaret already asked me to help with the Wednesday charity as well, and Mrs. Chen wants me to help serve breakfast to the boarders every morning. I am going to be busy, but I do not mind. It feels good to be useful again." They walked back toward the boarding house, taking the long way so they could have more time together. Preston told her about the ranch job he had been offered north of town, working cattle for a man named Samuel Peters. "It is good money," Preston said. "And Mr. Peters is a fair man, but it means I would be gone during the week, only coming back to town on Sundays." Penelope's face fell. "Oh, I do not have to take it," Preston said quickly. "I can find something else, something that keeps me in town." "No, you should take it. It is good work and you need to think about your future, your dream of buying land." She forced a smile. "I will be fine. I have work here and we can see each other on Sundays." But neither of them looked happy about the arrangement. Preston took her hand as they walked, threading his fingers through hers. "Penelope, I know we have not known each other long, but I need to ask you something." "What is it?" He stopped walking and turned to face her, still holding her hand. "I want to court you properly. I want everyone in this town to know that you are spoken for, that my intentions are honorable. Would you allow me that?" Penelope's eyes filled with tears, but they were happy tears this time. "Yes, yes, I would like that very much." Preston grinned and pulled her close, kissing her right there on the street. "Let the whole town see." He did not care. "Then it is settled. I am going to work hard and save every penny, and when I have enough to buy that land and build a house, I am going to ask you to marry me." "That could take years," Penelope said. "Then I will wait years. You are worth waiting for." They held each other close as the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. For the first time in her life, Penelope felt truly safe. And for the first time in his life, Preston felt like he had found home. The next months fell into a rhythm. Preston worked at the Peters Ranch during the week, coming into town every Sunday. He would attend church service, watch Penelope work in the kitchen with Margaret, and then they would spend the afternoon together, walking through town, talking about their dreams and plans for the future. The town had accepted their courtship, though there was still some gossip. Most people were kind, though, recognizing true affection when they saw it. Penelope had become a beloved figure at the church, known for her generous spirit and hard work. Mrs. Chen doted on her like a daughter, and the Reverend and his wife had become like family. In early summer, Preston finally had saved enough money to put a down payment on a piece of land east of town. It was 50 acres of decent grazing land with a small creek running through it, and a view of the mountains that took his breath away. He brought Penelope to see it on a warm June afternoon. "This is it," he said, gesturing to the rolling land. "This is where I am going to build our house." "Our house?" Penelope asked, her heart racing. Preston got down on one knee right there in the tall grass. He pulled out a simple gold ring, nothing fancy but bought with money he had earned through honest work. "Penelope Sanders, I love you more than I thought it was possible to love another person. You are my home, my heart, my everything. Will you marry me?" Penelope dropped to her knees in front of him, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." Preston slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her, laying her back in the soft grass. They held each other as the sun beat down warm on their faces, both grinning like fools. "When?" Penelope asked. "When can we get married?" "As soon as you want. I have enough saved to start building a house. It will be small at first, just 2 rooms, but I can add on as we go, as we have money." He hesitated. "As we have a family if you want children." "I want everything with you," Penelope said. "A house, children, a life together. I want it all." They were married in September of 1885 in the small church where Penelope had found her place in the community. Margaret Mitchell cried throughout the entire ceremony. Mrs. Chen gave Penelope away, since she had no family of her own. Preston wore his best suit, and Penelope wore a white dress that Margaret and Mrs. Chen had sewn together. The whole town turned out for the wedding, bringing food and gifts. Samuel Peters gave Preston a week off work as a wedding present. Even some of the miners who Penelope had served meals to every Sunday came to wish them well. As Preston and Penelope stood before Reverend Mitchell, exchanging vows, Preston thought back to that snowy day in February when he had found her collapsed in the street. How lost she had looked, how fragile. And now here she was, strong and healthy, smiling at him with such love in her eyes that it made his chest ache. "I pronounce you husband and wife," Reverend Mitchell said. "Preston, you may kiss your bride." Preston kissed his wife with all the tenderness and passion in his heart. The crowd cheered. Penelope laughed against his lips, and Preston thought he had never heard a more beautiful sound. They spent their wedding night in the small house Preston had built on their land. It was indeed just 2 rooms, a main room with a kitchen area and fireplace and a bedroom, but Penelope walked through it like it was a palace. "It is perfect," she said. "Absolutely perfect." "It is small," Preston said, suddenly worried she was just being polite. "It is ours," Penelope corrected. "That makes it perfect." Preston carried her over the threshold and they laughed together at the old tradition. That night they made the house truly theirs, coming together as husband and wife for the first time. Preston was gentle and patient, and Penelope gave herself to him completely, trusting him with all that she was. Afterward, they lay tangled together in their bed, talking quietly in the darkness. "You ever think about that day?" Penelope asked, tracing patterns on Preston's chest. "When you found me in the snow, all the time," Preston admitted. "I think about what would have happened if I had gone to the stable 5 minutes later, if someone else had found you first, or if no one had found you at all." "I would have died," Penelope said matter-of-factly. "I was too weak to get up on my own. I would have frozen in the street." Preston pulled her closer, kissing the top of her head. "I am glad I was there. Glad I found you. That was the day my life really started." "Mine too," Penelope whispered. "Everything before that was just surviving. But this, what we have, this is living." They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, the sound of crickets coming through the window, the stars bright overhead. The first year of their marriage was hard work but filled with joy. Preston continued working for Samuel Peters, while also building up their own small herd of cattle. Penelope kept her job at the church and also started taking and sewing work to bring in extra money. They worked from dawn until dusk most days, but they did it together, building something that was theirs. In the spring of 1886, Penelope discovered she was pregnant. She told Preston one evening after dinner, shy and nervous about how he would react. Preston's face went through a series of emotions, shock, wonder, then pure joy. He picked her up and spun her around, laughing. "We are going to have a baby," he kept saying. "A baby." "Are you happy?" Penelope asked, though she could see the answer on his face. "Happy does not even begin to cover it. I am over the moon. We are going to be parents." He immediately became protective, not wanting her to do any heavy work. Penelope laughed at his fussing but also found it endearing. As her belly grew through the summer and fall, Preston added on to their house, building a 3rd room for the baby. On a cold December night, Penelope went into labor. Margaret Mitchell and Mrs. Chen came to help, having experience with births. Preston paced outside in the main room, nearly wearing a hole in the floor with his worry. After hours that felt like an eternity, a baby's cry split the air. Preston's heart leaped into his throat. A few minutes later, Margaret came out, beaming. "You have a son," she said. "A healthy baby boy. And Penelope is doing fine." Preston rushed into the bedroom. Penelope was propped up in bed, sweaty and exhausted but smiling as she held a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. Preston approached slowly, almost afraid to breathe. "Come meet your son," Penelope said softly. Preston sat carefully on the edge of the bed and looked down at the tiny face peeking out from the blankets. The baby had a shock of dark hair and was making little snuffling sounds. Preston reached out with one finger and touched the baby's tiny hand. The infant's fingers immediately wrapped around Preston's finger with a surprisingly strong grip. "He is perfect," Preston whispered, his voice breaking with emotion. "He is absolutely perfect. We need to name him," Penelope said. They had discussed names for months but had not settled on anything definite. Looking at his son now, Preston knew exactly what the baby's name should be. "William," he said. "William Michael Morgan, after my father and my grandfather." Penelope smiled. "William, I like that. Hello, William." The baby yawned and both parents laughed at the tiny sound. Preston leaned down and kissed Penelope's forehead. "Thank you," he said. "For him, for everything, for being the most amazing woman I have ever known." "Thank you for finding me that day in the snow," Penelope said. "For saving my life and giving me this beautiful life we have built together." They sat together, the new family of three, as the winter wind howled outside. Inside, the fire kept them warm and their hearts were full. William was a good baby, sleeping through the night early and only crying when he was hungry or needed changing. Preston was a devoted father, coming home from work each day eager to hold his son. He would sit by the fire with William on his chest, telling the baby stories about the cattle and the horses, about the mountains and the desert. As William grew into a toddler, Preston taught him to walk, catching him each time he stumbled. Penelope watched them together and felt her heart swell with love for both her boys. In the summer of 1888, Penelope became pregnant again. This time, she gave birth to a daughter they named Rose, after Penelope's mother. Rose had her mother's blue eyes and her father's determined chin. The house continued to grow as the family did. Preston added another room, and then another. The cattle herd increased, and Preston was finally able to quit working for Samuel Peters and focus entirely on their own ranch. By 1890, the Morgan Ranch was thriving. They had 100 head of cattle, several horses, chickens, and a vegetable garden that Penelope tended with William and Rose's help. The small two-room house had grown into a proper ranch house with 5 rooms and a wraparound porch. Preston and Penelope would sit on that porch in the evenings after the children were asleep, watching the sun set over the mountains, holding hands like they had when they first started courting. "You remember when you proposed to me?" Penelope asked one evening. "Right here on this land." "I remember every detail," Preston said. "You said yes before I even got the whole question out." "I was too excited to wait," Penelope laughed. "I had been hoping you would ask for months." "I would have asked sooner if I had known that," Preston said, bringing her hand to his lips and kissing it. "You ever regret it?" Penelope asked quietly. "Taking on a woman with nothing. I came to you with no money, no family, nothing but the clothes on my back." Preston turned to face her fully, his expression serious. "Penelope Morgan, you listen to me. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. You brought me love, a family, a home in every sense of the word. I would do it all again in a heartbeat." "I love you," Penelope said, tears shining in her eyes. "I love you too. Always will." They kissed as the stars began to appear overhead, the same stars that had watched over them on their wedding night, the same stars that had been shining the night Preston found Penelope collapsed in the snow. In 1892, Penelope gave birth to twin boys, James and Joseph. The house became wonderfully chaotic with 4 children running around. Preston built yet another addition to accommodate the growing family. William, now 6 years old, took his role as oldest brother seriously, always watching out for his younger siblings. Rose was 4 and already showing signs of her mother's kind heart, always wanting to help with the babies. Preston worked hard to provide for his family, but he never missed the important moments. He was there for first steps, first words, bedtime stories, and morning cuddles. He taught William how to ride a horse and let Rose help him feed the chickens. In the evenings, after the children were in bed, Preston and Penelope would steal moments together, remembering what it was like when it was just the two of them. They still loved each other with the same intensity as those early days, but it had deepened and matured, becoming something even more precious. 6 years ago, I was dying in the snow, Penelope said one night as they lay in bed together. And now look at us. 4 beautiful children, a successful ranch, a life I never dreamed possible. You gave me that life too, Preston said. Before you, I was just drifting. No purpose, no direction. You gave me something to work for, something to build. We built it together, Penelope corrected. Together, Preston agreed, pulling her close. As the years passed, the Morgan family became a respected part of the Clifton Hill community. Preston served on the town council. Penelope continued her charity work at the church, now with her children helping alongside her. The ranch prospered, growing to over 200 head of cattle and becoming one of the more successful operations in the area. William grew into a strong young man who loved the ranch life. Rose became known for her beautiful singing voice and kind heart. The twins, James and Joseph, were inseparable and full of mischief that kept their parents on their toes. In 1895, Mrs. Chen passed away peacefully in her sleep. Preston and Penelope mourned the woman who had been instrumental in bringing them together. They made sure she had a proper burial in the church cemetery, and Penelope placed flowers on her grave every Sunday. She saved my life too, Penelope said as they stood at the grave after the funeral. If she had not let you bring me to the boarding house that day, if she had not helped nurse me back to health, I would not be here. She was a good woman, Preston said, his arm around Penelope's shoulders. She will be missed. Reverend Mitchell and his wife Margaret also grew older but remained active in the church. They watched the Morgan children grow with pride, having been there from the very beginning of Preston and Penelope's love story. In 1898, when William turned 12, Preston gave him his own horse and increased his responsibilities on the ranch. The boy thrived under the trust his father showed him, working hard to prove himself worthy. Rose, now 10, had inherited her mother's talent in the kitchen and often helped Penelope prepare meals for the family. She also continued to sing in the church choir, her voice bringing joy to the entire congregation. James and Joseph, at 6 years old, were finally old enough to start helping with small chores around the ranch. They fed the chickens, collected eggs, and helped their mother in the garden. Preston and Penelope watched their children grow with pride and wonder. On their 13th wedding anniversary, Preston took Penelope back to the spot where he had proposed. 13 years, he said, holding both her hands. 13 years, and I love you more now than I did that day I found you in the snow. How is that possible? Penelope asked, smiling. You loved me enough then to take in a complete stranger and turn your whole life upside down. Love grows, Preston said simply. Every day with you, every challenge we face together, every laugh we share, every tear we dry, it all makes the love stronger, deeper. You are not just my wife, Penelope. You are my best friend, my partner, my everything. Penelope wiped tears from her eyes. You gave me a life when I had nothing to live for. You gave me hope when I thought all hope was lost. And you have given me 13 years of the most beautiful life I could imagine. Here is to 50 more, Preston said, pulling her into his arms. At least 50, Penelope agreed, kissing him. They stood there in the place where their future had begun, looking out over the land they had built together. In the distance, they could see their house, smoke rising from the chimney, their children playing in the yard. It was more than either of them had ever dreamed possible. As they walked back toward the house, Penelope thought about that terrified young woman who had fled into the snow, starving and desperate. She could hardly believe that was her. That woman had been saved by a kind cowboy who saw past her circumstances to the person underneath. Preston had given her not just food and shelter that day, but a future. That evening, the whole family gathered for a special anniversary dinner. Penelope had made all of Preston's favorite foods, and the children had helped decorate the table with wildflowers. As they sat together, laughing and talking, Preston looked around at his family and felt overwhelming gratitude. "I want to say something," Preston said, standing up with his glass. Everyone quieted, looking at him expectantly. 13 years ago today, I asked your mother to marry me. It was the smartest thing I ever did. Penelope, you have made me the happiest man alive. And you four," he looked at each of his children, "you have made our life complete. I am the luckiest man in the world." "Hear, hear," William said, raising his own glass of milk. The family toasted, and Penelope felt tears of joy streaming down her face. This was everything she had never known she wanted, everything she had been denied for so long. And it was real, solid hers. After dinner, Preston and Penelope tucked the children into bed, a ritual they still did together when they could. They kissed each child goodnight, listening to their prayers, tucking blankets around small bodies. In their own room later, Preston and Penelope lay in bed, Penelope's head on Preston's chest, his arm around her shoulders. "You think they know how much we love them?" Penelope asked. "I think so. We show them every day." Preston kissed the top of her head. "Do you think they know how much we love each other?" "I hope so. I hope they grow up to find love like ours." "They will. Because we are showing them what real love looks like, how to be partners, how to support each other, how to weather storms together." The years continued to pass, each one bringing new challenges and new joys. There were hard times, years when the rain did not come and the cattle suffered. Times when money was tight and they had to make difficult decisions. But they faced everything together, Preston and Penelope, a team in every sense of the word. In 1902, William announced that he wanted to stay on the ranch permanently, that he had no desire to leave and see the world like Preston had at his age. Preston was secretly thrilled, though he made sure William understood he was free to make his own choices. "This is my choice," William said firmly. "I love this land, this life. Why would I want to be anywhere else?" Rose, at 14, was being courted by the son of a neighboring rancher. Preston was protective but tried not to be overbearing. Penelope reminded him that Rose was smart and capable, that they had raised her well. "I know," Preston grumbled, "but she is still my little girl." "She is growing up," Penelope said gently, "just like we did. Remember?" Preston pulled Penelope close. I remember a beautiful young woman who stole my heart the moment I saw her lying in the snow." "I was unconscious and half dead," Penelope protested, laughing. "And still the most beautiful thing I had ever seen," Preston insisted. The twins were growing into fine young men as well, though they remained as mischievous as ever. They kept their parents laughing with their antics, even as they drove them crazy sometimes. In 1905, when Preston and Penelope celebrated their 20th wedding anniversary, the whole town threw them a party. It was held at the church, with food and music and dancing. Nearly everyone in Clifton Hill attended. Reverend Mitchell, now quite elderly, made a speech about how he had watched Preston and Penelope's love grow over the years, how they were an example to the whole community of what marriage should be. "I remember when Preston first came to me, asking if there was any work for a young woman in need," the Reverend said. "I could see in his eyes that he already cared for her, even then. And over these 20 years, I have watched that care grow into one of the deepest loves I have ever witnessed." May we all be so blessed. Preston and Penelope danced together in the church hall, moving to the music played by local musicians. They only had eyes for each other, lost in their own world. 20 years, Preston said as they swayed together. Best 20 years of my life. Mine too, Penelope said. Though I have to say I prefer these years to that first day when I woke up half frozen and starving. Preston laughed. Fair point. Though I am grateful for that day, terrible as it was for you, it brought you to me. It brought us to each other, Penelope corrected. I found you just as much as you found me. As the party went late into the night, Preston and Penelope snuck outside for a moment of quiet. They walked hand in hand under the stars, just like they had done so many times over the years. Do you remember what you said to me that day at the boarding house? Penelope asked. When I asked why you were being so kind to me, I said because someone should. You also said I was not nobody, that I was remarkable. Penelope stopped walking and turned to face him. That was the moment I started falling in love with you, I think, when you made me feel like I mattered. You have always mattered, Preston said fiercely. From the very first moment, you mattered to me before I even knew your name. They kissed under the stars, 20 years of love and partnership flowing between them. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling. Let us go home, Preston said. To our family, our land, our life. Our beautiful life, Penelope agreed. The next decade brought even more changes. William married a sweet young woman named Sarah, and they built a house on the far side of the ranch property. Preston deeded half the ranch to William, making him a full partner in the operation. Rose married her childhood sweetheart and moved to his family's ranch 10 miles away. She visited often, bringing her own children to see their grandparents. Preston and Penelope loved being grandparents, spoiling the little ones and sending them home full of cookies and stories. James decided to become a teacher and moved to Tucson to attend college. Joseph stayed on the ranch, working alongside Preston and William. Preston and Penelope grew older together, their hair turning gray, lines appearing on their faces. But they still looked at each other with the same love as they had 20, 30 years before. In 1915, on their 30th wedding anniversary, Preston took Penelope back to the spot where he had found her in the snow. The town had grown over the years, and that street looked different now, but they could still remember exactly where she had fallen. 30 years ago, I was dying right here, Penelope said, looking around at the busy street. And you saved me. We saved each other, Preston said. I was dying in a different way, Penelope, dying of loneliness, of purposelessness. You gave me a reason to live, to work, to build something meaningful. Do you think it is strange that the worst day of my life led to the best thing in my life? Penelope asked. Not strange, just proof that even in our darkest moments there is hope. There is a chance for something beautiful to grow. They walked through the town, greeted warmly by people they had known for decades. Clifton Hill had grown, but it still maintained its sense of community. Preston and Penelope were pillars of that community, respected and loved by all who knew them. That evening, surrounded by their children, grandchildren, and friends, Preston and Penelope celebrated 3 decades of marriage. William gave a toast, thanking his parents for showing him what a good marriage looked like. Rose sang a song she had written especially for them. The twins told funny stories about growing up on the ranch. As the party wound down and people headed home, Preston and Penelope stood on their porch, watching the sun set over the mountains they loved. 30 years, Penelope said softly. It has gone by so fast. And yet it feels like I have loved you my whole life, Preston said. Like those years before you did not really count. We still have time, Penelope said. Years and years ahead of us, grandchildren to spoil, the ranch to run, each other to love. I plan to love you until my last breath, Preston said. And if there is anything after that, I will love you there too. They held each other as the stars came out, the same stars that had watched over them for 3 decades. The same stars that had been shining that snowy day in 1885 when a cowboy found a dying woman in the street and chose to help her, setting in motion a love story that would last a lifetime. The years continued to flow by. Preston and Penelope grew older but never grew tired of each other. They still held hands when they walked, still kissed each other goodnight, still found joy in the simple moments, a shared cup of coffee in the morning, watching the sunset together, working side by side in the garden. In 1920, they celebrated 35 years of marriage. By then, they had 8 grandchildren, with more on the way. The ranch was prosperous, run primarily by William and Joseph now, though Preston still helped out when he could. Penelope had finally retired from her charity work at the church, though she still attended services every Sunday, sitting in the same pew she had sat in for over 30 years. The current Reverend Mitchell's replacement, would often ask her to share stories of the early days of Clifton Hill. On quiet evenings, Preston and Penelope would sit on their porch, rocking in the chairs Preston had built years ago. They would hold hands and talk about their life, remembering the journey they had taken together. "Do you have any regrets?" Preston asked one evening. Penelope thought about it for a long moment. "I regret that day I had to run from Copper Ridge. I regret the fear and hunger and cold. But even that I cannot fully regret because it led me to you." "I regret not finding you sooner," Preston said. "I wish I could have saved you from all that suffering. You saved me when I needed saving most. That is what matters." Penelope squeezed his hand. "We got our happy ending, Preston. Against all odds, we got everything we ever wanted." "We did," Preston agreed, "and I would not change a single moment of our journey together." As they rocked together in comfortable silence, Penelope thought about the young woman she had been, desperate and afraid, collapsing in the snow with no hope for the future. She thought about the kind cowboy who had scooped her up and carried her to safety, who had fed her soup and promised she would be okay. That soup had saved her life in more ways than one. It had given her the strength to recover physically, yes, but more than that, it had been the first gesture of kindness in a long line of gestures that had taught her she was worthy of love. That cowboy had seen something in her worth saving, and in doing so, had given her a whole new life. "Thank you," Penelope said suddenly. Preston looked at her, confused. "For what?" "For the soup," she said, smiling at his bewildered expression. "For carrying me inside and making me soup that day. For everything that came after." Preston understood. He brought her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "Thank you for waking up, for fighting to live, for giving me a chance to love you." They sat together as the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant colors. Around them, the ranch bustled with life. Their children and grandchildren, the cattle and horses, the land they had built into something beautiful through decades of hard work and love. In 1925, on their 40th wedding anniversary, Preston and Penelope renewed their vows in the same church where they had married. Their children and grandchildren were there, along with what felt like the entire town. It was a celebration not just of their marriage, but of the life they had built together, the community they had helped create. Reverend Thomas, who had taken over after Reverend Mitchell's death, spoke about how Preston and Penelope's love was a testament to the power of kindness and compassion. How a single act of goodness on a snowy day 40 years ago had rippled outward, touching countless lives. As Preston and Penelope faced each other, repeating the vows they had spoken 4 decades earlier, there was not a dry eye in the church. Their love was evident in every glance, every touch, every word. "I promise to love you for all the days of my life," Preston said, his voice strong despite his age. "I promise to cherish you for all the days of mine," Penelope responded, her eyes shining with tears. They kissed, and the church erupted in applause. 40 years, and the love was still as strong as ever. The celebration continued at the ranch with food and music and dancing. Preston and Penelope danced together, moving slowly now but still in perfect rhythm with each other. 40 years, Preston said. "Can you believe it?" "I can," Penelope said, "because I have lived every single day of those 40 years and each one has been a gift." "Here is to 40 more," Preston said. "I do not know if we will get 40 more," Penelope said honestly, "but whatever time we have left, I want to spend it exactly like this. With you, with our family on this land we built together." "That sounds perfect to me," Preston agreed. As they danced, their grandchildren watching with wonder, Preston thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment. A young woman dying in the snow. A cowboy who could not walk past someone in need. A bowl of soup that led to a lifetime of love. It seemed impossible, like something out of a story rather than real life. And yet, here they were, proof that miracles could happen, that love could bloom even in the harshest conditions, that kindness could change everything. The party lasted late into the night, but eventually everyone went home or to bed. Preston and Penelope stood on their porch, alone at last, watching the stars. "I love you," Preston said, the words as true now as they had been 40 years ago. "I love you too," Penelope said. "Always have, always will." They went inside their house, the house that had started as 2 rooms and had grown along with their family. They climbed into their bed, the same bed they had shared for 40 years, and held each other close. "Sweet dreams, my love," Preston whispered. "Sweet dreams," Penelope replied. They fell asleep in each other's arms just as they had done countless times before, secure in the knowledge that they would wake up together in the morning, that they would have another day to love each other, to appreciate the beautiful life they had built from nothing but hope and determination. The years that followed were good ones. Preston and Penelope continued to enjoy their life together, watching their grandchildren grow, seeing the ranch thrive under William and Joseph's management. They took joy in the simple pleasures, morning coffee together, evening walks, quiet conversations. In the spring of 1930, Preston fell ill with pneumonia. Penelope nursed him through it, sitting by his bedside day and night, refusing to leave him. Preston recovered, but he was weaker after that, his body finally showing the wear of 70 years of hard living. "You are not allowed to leave me yet," Penelope told him fiercely as he convalesced. "We still have too much living to do." "Yes, madam," Preston said, smiling at her determination. "I am not ready to leave you either." He recovered his strength slowly but surely, and by summer he was back on his feet, though he tired more easily now. Penelope watched him carefully, making sure he did not overexert himself, much to his amusement. "I am not made of glass," he protested when she fussed over him. "You are precious to me," Penelope said. "I am going to take care of you the way you took care of me all those years ago." Preston pulled her close. "We take care of each other. That is how this works." In the fall of that year, they celebrated their 45th wedding anniversary quietly, just the 2 of them and their immediate family. It was a peaceful celebration, filled with love and gratitude. As they sat on their porch that evening, watching another sunset, Penelope leaned her head on Preston's shoulder. 45 years, she said. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday that you carried me into that boarding house. Other times it feels like a lifetime ago." "It was a lifetime ago," Preston said. "A whole lifetime that we built together." "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had not found me that day?" Penelope asked. "I try not to," Preston admitted. because the thought of a world where I never met you, never loved you, never built this life with you, that is too terrible to imagine." "I would have died," Penelope said simply, "and you would have kept drifting, working other people's ranches, never settling down." "Probably," Preston agreed. "We saved each other, Penelope. In every way a person can be saved." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars came out. The same stars that had witnessed their entire journey together, from that desperate day in the snow to this peaceful evening surrounded by the evidence of their love and hard work. As the years advanced into the early 1930s, Preston and Penelope settled into a gentle rhythm of days. The ranch was fully in William and Joseph's hands now, giving Preston and Penelope time to simply enjoy each other's company. They would take short walks around the property, Preston leaning more heavily on his cane, but still determined to move. Penelope's own steps had slowed, but she kept pace with her husband, their fingers intertwined as they had been for nearly 5 decades. Rose visited often with her children and grandchildren. The twins, now grown men with families of their own, came by every Sunday for dinner. The house that had once held just Preston and Penelope now regularly overflowed with 3 generations of Morgans, all of them evidence of the love that had started with a bowl of soup and a stranger's kindness. On their 50th wedding anniversary in September 1935, the entire town of Clifton Hill celebrated with them. A huge party was held at the church, with people coming from miles around to honor the couple who had become legendary in the community. Stories were told about Preston's kindness and Penelope's generosity, about how they had built not just a successful ranch, but a family that exemplified what love and commitment truly meant. Preston, now 74 years old, stood with Penelope, now 70, and addressed the crowd. His voice was not as strong as it once was, but it carried clear and true. "50 years ago, I married the love of my life," he said, looking at Penelope with eyes that still sparkled with devotion. "It was the best decision I ever made. Penelope has been my partner, my best friend, my reason for getting up every morning. She has given me 4 incredible children, 8 grandchildren, and more joy than any man deserves. I am the luckiest man who ever lived." Penelope stood and took his hand. "And I am the luckiest woman. 50 years ago, Preston saved my life. But he did not just save me that one day. He has saved me every day since with his love, his loyalty, his unwavering support. He gave me a home when I had none, a family when I was alone, and a love that has sustained me through every challenge. I love you, Preston Morgan, today and always." They kissed, and the crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Their children and grandchildren surrounded them, hugging them, celebrating them, grateful for the example of love they had been given. That night, alone in their bedroom, Preston and Penelope held each other close. 50 years, Preston whispered into the darkness, "and I love you more today than I did on our wedding day." "I love you too," Penelope said, "more than words can say." They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, 2 hearts that had beaten as one for half a century. The following years were peaceful. Preston and Penelope spent their days in quiet contentment, surrounded by family, tending a small garden, sitting on their porch watching the world go by. They had earned their rest after a lifetime of hard work, and they enjoyed every moment of it together. In the spring of 1938, Preston's health began to fail more seriously. His heart was giving out, the doctor said. There was nothing to be done but make him comfortable. Preston accepted this news with grace, though Penelope was devastated. "I am not ready to lose you," she said, tears streaming down her face as she sat beside his bed. "I am not ready to leave you," Preston said, his voice weak but his eyes still full of love. "But if I must, I need you to promise me something. "Anything," Penelope said. "Promise me you will keep living, that you will not give up. Our children and grandchildren need you." "I promise," Penelope whispered. "But not yet. You are not leaving me yet." "Not yet," Preston agreed, squeezing her hand. Preston held on through the spring and into the summer, determined to make every moment count. The family gathered around him, taking turns sitting with him, sharing memories, telling stories. Preston smiled and laughed, his spirit still strong even as his body failed. In early August, on a warm evening with the windows open and a gentle breeze blowing through, Preston gathered his strength to speak to Penelope one last time. The whole family was there, but he only had eyes for his wife. "Penelope," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "My beautiful Penelope, thank you for 53 years of the most incredible life. Thank you for being my partner, my love, my everything. You made me the man I became. You gave me a purpose, a family, a reason to be better. I love you so much." "I love you too," Penelope said, holding his hand tightly, tears streaming down her face. "I love you so much, Preston. Thank you for saving me. Thank you for loving me. Thank you for everything." Preston smiled, that same smile that had made Penelope's heart flutter 53 years ago. "Do you remember the soup?" he asked. Penelope laughed through her tears. "I remember the soup. Best soup I ever made," Preston said, his eyes starting to close. "Led to the best life I ever lived." "The best life," Penelope agreed. Preston's breathing slowed, becoming more peaceful. Surrounded by his wife and children, with love filling the room, Preston Morgan passed away quietly just as the sun set over the mountains he had loved. Penelope held him, kissing his forehead, whispering her love one more time. Her heart was breaking, but she knew he was at peace. He had lived a full life, a good life, and he had been loved every single day of it. The funeral was attended by what seemed like the entire territory. Preston had touched so many lives over his 77 years, and people came from far and wide to pay their respects. He was buried in the church cemetery, not far from Mrs. Chen and Reverend Mitchell, with a view of the mountains and the ranch he had built. Penelope kept her promise to Preston. She kept living, kept being there for her children and grandchildren. It was hard without him, harder than anything she had ever done. The house felt empty without his presence, without his voice, without his touch. But she filled it with family, with memories, with gratitude for the 53 years they had shared. She would sit on the porch in the evenings, in the rocking chair next to the empty one that had been Preston's, and talk to him as if he were still there. She would tell him about the grandchildren's accomplishments, about how the ranch was doing, about how much she missed him. On their wedding anniversary each year, she would visit his grave with an armful of wildflowers. She would sit beside the stone and tell him the same thing she had told him every anniversary when he was alive. "Best decision I ever made, marrying you. I would do it all again in a heartbeat." Penelope lived for 5 more years after Preston's death. She remained active and engaged with her family, watching her grandchildren grow and even welcoming great-grandchildren. But everyone could see that part of her had gone with Preston, that she was waiting for the day when she could join him. That day came in the fall of 1943. Penelope passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 78. She was buried beside Preston, their graves side by side, just as they had been side by side in life. Their children gathered around the graves, grieving but also grateful. Grateful for the example of love their parents had shown them. Grateful for the family they had created. Grateful for the legacy of kindness and compassion that would live on through generations. William stood at the graves, now an older man himself, and told the story one more time. The story that had become family legend. The story of how his father had found his mother collapsed in the snow, how he had carried her inside and made her soup, How that simple act of kindness had blossomed into a love that lasted over half a century. "They showed us what love really means," William said to his own children and grandchildren. "Not just the romantic kind, though they had plenty of that, but the kind of love that shows up every day, that works hard, that sacrifices, that chooses the other person again and again. That is the legacy they left us. That is what we need to remember." As the family dispersed, returning to their lives but carrying the memory of Preston and Penelope in their hearts, the sun set over the ranch. The same mountains Preston and Penelope had looked at thousands of times stood sentinel over their final resting place. The ranch continued to thrive under the management of their descendants. The house they had built together, the land they had worked, the community they had been part of, all of it continued on, a living testament to their love and hard work. And sometimes, on quiet evenings, when the wind blew just right, it almost seemed like you could see two figures on that porch, holding hands, watching the sunset together. Two souls who had found each other against all odds and had loved each other with a devotion that transcended even death. The story of Preston and Penelope Morgan became part of Clifton Hill's history, told and retold through generations. The tale of the cowboy who carried a dying woman out of the snow, who made her soup, who fell in love with her and built a life that became a beacon of hope and love for an entire community. It was a reminder that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can change everything. That love can bloom even in the harshest conditions. That two broken, lonely people can find each other and create something beautiful and lasting. And in the church cemetery, on two stones side by side, were the names Preston Morgan and Penelope Morgan, with dates marking lives well lived, and a single inscription beneath both names. Together in life, together in eternity. Their love was a gift to all who knew them. The end.